Hello, welcome back. This is Jeff Byers, and this is Module 3. We're going to talk about file management. This is really important when you're working with textures. Now we're going to be UV mapping, we're going to be texturing, we're going to be rendering. So we need to set up a project now that will encompass all of the work that we've done so far. We should have a low poly large sci-fi crate. We should have a high poly. Actually, we should have a medium poly, which is the low poly with the edge loops. So you should have a low poly, a medium poly, one with the edge loops, and then you should have a high poly in Maya, and smoothed it too. And then you exported it out as an OBJ, brought it into Mudbox, and then you detailed it, and then you exported that monstrous large file out as an OBJ. So those are 4 files you need to have. So how do we get those all to work together? And that's part of project management. I'm going to talk about that today. So project management is essential to being successful with your projects, especially when you work with texture mapping and finding your textures, because Maya has a specific directory it wants to look at and wants to see. So if you have textures that you find all over the place, then Maya will not be able to find them, and when you open your scene it won't see those textures. So it's really important that we get you in the habit of creating a project. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to File, let's go to Project Window. Okay, we're going to click on New, and we need your first name, your last name, and we need to have, what is this? This module 3. Okay. So, and then you can see that the scenes, the assets, and images, and everything's in here. Maya will create all these folders for you, and this is where it's going to place it. Now, of course, you can tell it whatever location you'd like, but right now I'm going to create this folder inside of this folder here, or in this area here in the projects folder. Okay. Now Maya likes to see this configuration. Now obviously it's looking for these 2 words right there. It doesn't care about the rest of this. You could actually set up a folder in your external hard drive if you wanted to, and run off of that. And there's a lot of times I'll do that as well if I'm bringing stuff back and forth to college. So, but these 2, it needs to see Maya, and then projects, and of course then your folder. Okay. But the rest back can be controlled by you if you'd like to put it in a different location. It's up to you. Go ahead and click on Accept. Alright, so now I can find it by going in and finding that folder. But right now I'm just going to concentrate on this right now. So when I save, you can see that I can go save scene as, and you can see it's going to my C drive. Okay. Alright, so what I need to do is the next step would be to go ahead and manage my files. So to do that, I need to have my files in one spot. Now I created a folder for my sci-fi crate, and you can see that I've got my low poly triangulated, I've got my high poly crate, I've got my low poly crate, and I've got my medium poly crate. Now this one here, the Mudbox, is very large. It's an OBJ. This is what I exported out. You can see the rest of this stuff is very low. It's like 5.6 or this is my high poly crate, 5 megabytes, and this is 20 megabytes. Okay, so between here and here I've gone up quite a bit. Okay, and I believe this is my detailed object. We'll look at that in just a little bit. But we want to take all of these, okay, and we want to copy those. I'm going to copy, and then I want to paste them into the folder I just created in Maya. Maya projects, and here you can see that folder that I created. Double click on that, you can see all the folders that we had created before. And we're going to go into the scenes folder, double click on that, and go ahead and paste. Right. So now I'm pasting all of those pieces. Now you'll probably have to go and find these pieces and copy and paste them into one directory. Okay. And it needs to be in your scenes. So all your models go in your scenes folder. Now your textures will go into source images folder. Okay. All of your textures that you find on the internet or whatever, when you create them, you want to make sure they're going to your source images folder. Anything you render will go to the images folder. Okay. And then so on and so forth. So if you save an OBJ, it'll probably want to go into data. But the main three are scenes, source images, and images. So scenes is where all your models go. Source images is where all your textures go. And images where all your rendered images go. Okay? So those are the three that you have to really watch out for. So we've got all my models in here, so they're easy to find. Okay. So I'll go back to Maya. Let's go ahead and finish this up. And now with all that done, now I can go to File, and I can go to Set Project, click on my folder. You don't need to go any farther than just the folder itself. Click Set. Now I can go into File, Import. Or of course, if I save it as an MB file or an MA file, I can go to File, Open. Okay? But it doesn't see anything. Even though I have, let's say this open, it still does not see. Okay? Because it's not an MA or an MB file. So what I have to do, because I saved them as an OBJ, so I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Import, and this is what you'll do. You'll import all your objects. So let's go in here and import, and now all of a sudden you can see them. Okay, and so I've got an FBX, okay, an OBJ. So it really depends on what I want. That's why I have you guys save all those types of objects. Different types object files. So if I click on OBJ, now the MTL that comes with the OBJ. So when I export something out as an OBJ, the MTL means materials. So if you put a Lambert or a Blinn, that MTL is connected through code between the two. So you need to have both of those in there for it to see the Lambert material or textures. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and click on OBJ. I don't need to select MTL. If it's in the same folder, it'll connect. Okay? So I'm going to do my low poly try and import that in. I'm going to hit the F key. I'm going to just hover over every one of these, the F key. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do wireframe unshaded so you guys can see what it looks like. Wireframe unshaded is just this little guy right up here. Okay. I don't like the way a triangulated object looks, but we need that to bring it into Painter, Substance Painter, okay? Because it doesn't like n-gons, okay? That's a big deal. Mudbox doesn't like it either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, and I'm going to, again, I need to make sure my scene is managed. So I'm going to select the object and click on this guy icon, which allows me to create a new layer and assign it to selected object. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to rename that low poly try, so that tells me it's triangulated, and I'm going to go click on save. I'm going to turn that off. Okay. Alright, so it looks like I'm in feet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my preferences down here in the corner. It looks like a guy running away from a gear, and I'm going to go to settings, and settings, and I'm going to go from centimeter to foot. There we go. So now when I turn that on, you can see it's really important that my chest is in feet. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 feet wide, which is about right, and about 3 feet tall. Perfect. Alright, so I did this before. I've done this earlier before I went into Mudbox. I made sure I got into feet scale. It's important that you're in feet scale, otherwise your object will be really teeny in Mudbox. And when you finally get into Substance Painter, your objects will be basically too small too as well, and you might have some errors with your baking. So it's not hard to fix. You can always go into feet and then scale your object up. You have to scale all of them at the same time because they all have to be exactly the same size. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep on importing. But before I do that, I'm just going to turn that off so I don't see it. And so I'm going to go into import, and I'm going to go to the next one. So it's going to be the high poly crate. Now that's going to look a little different than the Mudbox crate, so we'll leave that last in case it crashes. And it depends on how much system memory you have. I've got 32. We'll see what happens. But it's going to be a very high resolution object, and it should open it okay. But just be cautious. Do that last, and right before you do that one, save your scene so you don't have to go through all this again. So high poly crate, and it's going to be an FBX, which is fine. Import, and there it is. There's my high poly crate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add that to a layer by doing the same thing we did before with the low poly, and this is going to be the high poly. Okay, whoops. It just don't do spaces. Mine does not like spaces, so I do an underscore. So there's the high poly. Save it and turn that off, and then I'm going to go to File, Import. I got one more. We got 4 we have to do. So we've got the high poly crate, the low poly crate, and the medium poly. Let's go to the low poly crate. Open that up, and there it is. That's the one we're going to actually be texturing. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and that is going to be the low poly. Okay, there we go. Alright, so we turn that off and on, and you can see that they're occupying exactly the same space. They're exactly the same size. So when I brought this one in, so what I did was just like the tutorials, I scaled them up, and even if you didn't scale them up, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. So, and we got the low poly tri, which I really won't use anymore. That just goes into Substance Painter or Mudbox, or not Mudbox, but Substance Painter, so we can paint on it. Alright, so that's what we have so far. We got one more to do. Actually, 2 more to do. I didn't want to do that. Let me go and Control Z back. I don't know why I did that. Alright, so let's turn that off, and let's go ahead and import. Alright, low poly, and then we got the medium poly. Let's take a look at that. And there's the medium poly. And that's got all the edge loops, which is kind of cool. All the edge loops. How do I know that? Well, let's click on it, and let's turn off wireframe on there. There we go. And then I'll hit the smooth key, the number 3 key, and there we go. Alright. I always keep my my medium poly, and all that's telling me is that when I say medium poly is that I've got all the edge loops done. Okay, that's what that means, right? So now I'm going to put that in, and that's going to be called medium poly. Alright. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. Okay, and we'll turn that off and on, and that looks pretty good. Alright, so we don't need the medium poly. Low poly is important. And okay, so let's take a look at my low poly. And if I go to UVs and I go to UV editor, this will show my low poly. It doesn't look like it's been UV mapped, which is fine because that's going to be part of your processes to go ahead and UV map that. And the high poly, let's take a look at that. UV editor, and that doesn't look like anything is. Whoops, I need to have it selected before I do that. Yeah, got the same kind of thing. There's, and the thing is with high poly, you won't need that to UV map that. It's just the low poly that you're going to be UV mapping that guy right there. And the triangulated one, UV editor, and it looks like this one I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one is laid out in Udemy style. Okay, and that's what I'm going to bring into and bake with Substance Painter. Alright, so, and you'll be laying your UVs out and watching that video. Okay, that looks pretty good. Alright, so right now, we're going to be working with the low poly try, and that needs to be, and it won't matter if you lay out the UVs before you triangulate. You can do that and then triangulate afterwards, and it won't mess anything up. It'll be fine. So you should be good. And if you get caught up in having to use the low poly triangulated object and add the textures on there, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to go and use this one here. It just looks cleaner. Okay, it's going to look in game. If you were to bring it into the game would triangulate it anyway. So having it triangulated will actually will have the game engine will run faster. So I just triangulated it. It's not a big deal. When you show off your low poly to me, though, I do like to see this. And when I want wireframe on shaded, that means this. Okay. So low poly, we want to make the low poly look like a high poly. Now notice I don't have the handles or the clips or anything on there. That I'm going to texture those separately and bring those in later and import those in and reattach them and add textures to them. Right, that'll be in other videos. And it's okay if it says it's module 7 or module 8. Just ignore that. The videos are good, and have fun, and I will see you soon. If you do scale your objects, they just have to be occupying the same exact space. So if you got the high poly and the low poly, they have to be occupying the same space, and they have to be in the center 0, 0, 0. Okay, you can see both of mine are on top of each other. That's basically what I mean. Occupying the same space, they're on top of each other. Okay, there's the low poly and there's the high poly. Okay, otherwise it won't bake out properly. Okay, alright, so when all that's done, you've already got your high poly. Okay, so your high poly, actually you sent this out to Mudbox and you detailed it. You won't use this again. You're not going to be using this for your bake because it doesn't have all the detail. So Mudbox, you're going to be using Mudbox, the Mudbox model later, but that's what you are going to be using as the high poly to bake the maps for the low poly. You only have to worry about just getting this in and exported out in your high poly. Then you'll be able to bake all that information into the low poly, all the really cool little because otherwise if you don't, it will just look really flat. Okay. Anyway, that's it for managing files, and I'll see you soon in the next video.